Imagine this. You're sitting in a room. There are no chains on your wrists, no locked doors, no bars on the windows. You're free to move, speak, even leave, at least in theory. But every time you glance toward the exit, someone's eyes are already on you. Watching. Judging. Measuring your movements against invisible expectations. The door is open, but your feet won't move. You tell yourself you're staying by choice. After all, no one forced you to come here. But deep down, you know the truth. You're afraid, not of the door, not of the world outside it, but of what leaving might say about you. What they might think. What you might become. So you stay. And here's the twist, so do they. The others in the room feel the same thing, but no one speaks of it. Instead, you all keep pretending, smiling politely, measuring every word, every laugh, every glance. Because in this room, authenticity is dangerous. Honesty might set you apart. And to be different, to be seen as different, is the one sin this quiet hell cannot forgive. Now, what if that room is your life? What if hell isn't a place beneath the earth or beyond the grave, but something far more intimate, insidious, and mundane? Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." A phrase so often misunderstood it's practically been declawed by pop culture. But what if he meant something far more terrifying, and far more personal? What if hell isn't merely being with others, but being seen by them? Watched. Interpreted. Reduced. What if true freedom isn't the ability to act, but the ability to be without being defined? Now ask yourself this, how free are you, really? Not legally. Not socially. But existentially. Spiritually. Deep in the marrow of your being. Have you ever made a choice that wasn't contaminated by the gaze of others? Have you ever laughed, cried, or raged without first anticipating how you'd be perceived? Have you ever lived, truly lived, without curating your existence like a museum exhibit, carefully arranged for the approval of invisible spectators? The philosopher Sartre didn't paint freedom as a gift. He called it a curse. A terrifying responsibility. A demand to create meaning in a universe that offers none. A demand to choose, over and over, without excuses, without hiding behind fate, upbringing, or society. And yet, we run from it. We cling to labels, roles, identities, not because they define us, but because they excuse us. We are doctors, lovers, rebels, victims, artists, not because those words capture who we are, but because they protect us from having to find out. But Sartre wasn't naive. He knew why we do it. Because being free, truly free, means we are also accountable. It means we can't blame our parents, our culture, or even our biology. It means we are the authors of every choice and every failure. It means that when we lie to ourselves, we are both the deceiver and the deceived. And worse still, we're never alone in it. There's always someone watching. Even when you're by yourself, that internalized voice, your audience, follows you. You hear them judging your thoughts before you even think them. Like ghosts in your psyche, they live in your head, rent-free, shaping your every impulse. That's the hell Sartre was talking about. Not fire and brimstone. Not eternal torture. But the agonizing awareness of being reduced to an object in someone else's world. A character in someone else's story. A reflection in someone else's mirror. And yet, and this is where the great contradiction lies, we need others. We crave love, connection, community. But the very people who make us feel most alive also make us feel most exposed. The people who witness our greatest moments also become the ones whose gaze we fear the most. So again, the question. What does it mean to be free when you are always being watched? Is it even possible to be authentic in a world where you are constantly performing? Is there such a thing as a self that exists beyond the gaze of others? Or is freedom just another illusion, a beautiful lie we tell ourselves to make the prison feel more spacious? Maybe Sartre was right. Maybe hell is other people. Or maybe hell is the version of you that exists in their minds. And now, the real question burns at the center of your consciousness. Can you escape that version? Or will you spend your entire life negotiating with shadows? You think you're the one steering the ship. You wake up, make choices, form opinions, chase dreams, and it all feels like you. Like your authentic will is the engine behind your life. But what if that's an illusion? What if the problem isn't that you're not free, but that you're trapped in a version of freedom that was manufactured for you, shaped by unconscious forces so subtle, so ancient, they masquerade as your own voice? Let's peel back the layers. At the heart of Sartre's philosophy lies a brutal but liberating idea: existence precedes essence. That means you're not born with a fixed nature, destiny, or identity. There's no cosmic blueprint for who you're meant to be. You arrive in the world empty-handed, then spend your life building meaning through your choices. Sounds empowering, right? But here's the twist: that freedom isn't a blank check, it's a burden. Because without a preordained essence, there's nothing to hide behind. No fate. No divine purpose. No escape hatch. You are, in Sartre's words, condemned to be free. And the moment you realize that, your stomach tightens. Because to be condemned to freedom is to carry the weight of your own existence every waking second. There's no default setting. No one else to blame. No script to follow. Just you, improvising your identity moment by moment in front of a silent, watching universe. But why does this provoke such terror? Here's where psychology enters the stage. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we suppress because it doesn't fit the roles we play. From childhood, we're conditioned to be good, obedient, successful. We adapt, contort, and fracture ourselves to fit into molds carved by culture, family, religion. In doing so, we exile parts of ourselves. Desires we weren't allowed to feel. Thoughts we weren't allowed to think. The raw, chaotic, unfiltered self, buried under a mountain of polite masks. But the shadow doesn't die. It festers. And every time you sense someone's gaze on you, it stirs. Every time you feel exposed, embarrassed, judged, that's the shadow flinching. Because you don't fear others seeing you. You fear them seeing the parts of you you've disowned. Now imagine this dynamic projected onto the entire architecture of society. Friedrich Nietzsche warned us. He saw the decay of true individual will beneath the weight of herd morality, the pressure to conform, to please, to obey. In the genealogy of morals, he speaks of guilt as a social technology, a way of internalizing control. Once external punishment was no longer enough, societies taught individuals to turn violence inward, punishing themselves, feeling shame, doubting their worth. This is how the they self is born. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz and creator of logotherapy, knew what happened when people lost their inner compass. He watched men break, not from hunger or cruelty, but from the loss of meaning. They became hollow, ghost-like, desperate to find something, anything, to anchor their identity. And meaning, in modern times, often comes from others. From likes. From applause. From being seen. But as Sartre warned, to be seen is to become a thing. In Being in Nothingness, he described the gaze as an existential mirror. When someone looks at you, you cease being a pure subject, you become an object in their world. No longer the author of your own story, you are a character in theirs. Reduced, simplified, categorized. This is where the psychological knife twists. Because deep down, you start to anticipate the gaze before it even arrives. You preemptively sculpt yourself to be palatable. You become your own censor, your own PR team, your own executioner. You perform freedom while suppressing the terrifying realization that real freedom, raw, unscripted, unpredictable freedom, might make you unlovable. So you opt for safety. You become what Arthur Schopenhauer would call a will-less creature, trapped in the performance of self, sedated by comfort, numbed by the absence of risk. You make the safe choices. You say the right things. You play the game. And slowly, the self that might have been, the strange, wild, defiant self, rots in the corner of your psyche, whispering, "This isn't who you are." But the whisper is hard to hear under the applause of the audience. And so you live, half awake. You mistake social acceptance for self-worth. You confuse control with confidence. You sacrifice your truth for inclusion, your desires for approval, your essence for an image. This is the hidden problem Sartre wanted us to see. That we flee from freedom, not because we are weak, but because freedom demands authenticity. And authenticity is dangerous in a world where others hold mirrors to our souls. We are haunted not just by what others see, but by what we imagine they see. And the more we internalize those imagined gazes, the more we become strangers to ourselves. Sartre's insight wasn't that people are hell. His insight was that being reduced to an object, a thing in someone else's perception, that is hell. But what makes it even worse? We participate in it. We volunteer for it. We hand over our freedom in exchange for safety, praise, and predictability. We become the architects of our own psychological prisons. And worst of all, we call it love. We call it success. We call it life. But beneath the masks, the smiles, the accolades, the truth remains. You were born free. But somewhere along the way, you chose the comfort of being seen over the terror of being real. And now, you wonder why you feel empty, even when you're admired. You tell yourself it's fine. That everyone wears a mask. That playing the game is just part of being human. But you feel it, don't you? That slow erosion at the edges of your soul. Not a sharp pain. Not a scream. Just a silent, consistent dimming. A gnawing sense that something isn't quite right, like a house where the lights keep flickering, but you convince yourself it's just faulty wiring. So you stay. You adapt. You get used to the dark. But what you're really getting used to is self-abandonment. Here's the tragedy: the longer you perform, the less you remember the self that existed before the performance began. The longer you stay in the role, the more the role becomes you. Not because it is you, but because your nervous system has been conditioned to equate visibility with safety. Let's talk neuroscience. The human brain didn't evolve for truth. It evolved for survival. And one of its primary survival mechanisms is social belonging. Thousands of years ago, being ostracized from your tribe meant death. So the brain learned to scan constantly for disapproval, threat, rejection. Even today, your amygdala fires the same way during a social humiliation as it does during physical pain. This is why you freeze in meetings. Why you rehearse texts before sending them. Why you downplay your dreams, silence your instincts, or fake a laugh you don't feel. You're not weak. You're wired for this. And your culture? It profits from it. In a world driven by hypervisibility, surveillance has become gamified. Social media didn't invent the gaze, it simply digitized it. Monetized it. Now, you don't just worry about how people see you in the moment, you worry about how they'll see you forever. Every post, every photo, every opinion becomes a permanent artifact in the museum of your digital self. So you curate, edit, retouch, filter, craft an identity like a brand, and then wonder why your reflection feels alien. You call it influencing. But what's being influenced is you. And here's the deeper cut. This performance doesn't just affect your relationships with others, it distorts your relationship with yourself. Psychologists call it self-alienation, the gradual disconnection from your inner world as you orient your identity around external validation. You start to make decisions not based on what feels right, but based on what looks good. You choose careers for status, partners for appearances, values for trendiness. Eventually, you don't even ask, "What do I want?" You ask, "What will they think if I want this?" That's not freedom. That's behavioral puppetry. And the strings are invisible. Cognitive science sheds more light here. The default mode network, a brain system involved in self-reflection, activates when you're thinking about yourself or others thinking about you. But research shows it's more active when you're imagining how others perceive you than when you're focused on your own inner experience. Translation? Your brain is more you when it's being seen than when it's being. Think about that. We are becoming selves in anticipation of others. Not in presence. Not in solitude. In speculation. In projection. In the fiction of their imagined gaze. And the cost? Intimacy without authenticity. Achievement without fulfillment. Freedom without presence. You find yourself in rooms full of people, feeling utterly alone. Not because they don't see you, but because they see a version of you that no longer matches the ghost behind your eyes. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you feel rage. You agree to terms you never signed. And all of it, every micro-concession, is recorded in the body. Trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk says, the body keeps the score. Over time, the price of performance manifests as chronic stress, anxiety, depression. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something real in you is being silenced. You've become fluent in a language that never belonged to you. But language shapes thought. So what happens when you forget your native tongue? You lose the ability to name your truth. To even feel your truth. And once that happens, you don't just lose connection to yourself, you lose connection to others, too. Because how can anyone love you if they don't know who you are? And how can they know who you are if you don't? This is the quiet catastrophe of our time, a society of individuals starving for connection while drowning in projection. We think we're being rejected. But what's really being rejected is the mask. And somewhere inside, the real you watches it all with growing despair, waiting, hoping, begging to be let out. But you don't let them out. Not yet. Because to drop the mask feels like death. Not metaphorical death. Social death. The end of your place in the tribe. The end of you you've spent years constructing. The death of your avatar. And so you continue. Smiling through the ache. Laughing through the numbness. Performing with a kind of haunted precision. But the worst part? You get good at it. So good, in fact, that even you forget it's a performance. Even you begin to believe that the applause means you're free. But deep down, you know. Something is missing. Something sacred. Something raw. You see it sometimes when you meet someone who doesn't flinch from your truth. When you're alone in the woods, far from the reach of mirrors. When you cry and you don't know why. When the silence grows so loud it starts to sing. And in those moments, the illusion flickers. You remember, you were born wild. Not this. Not someone performing their own life like a televised ceremony. You were born to burn. To choose. To suffer. To love. To be seen, yes, but first, to see yourself. But you can't return to that until you first understand how far you've drifted. And how much you've lost while chasing the approval of people who never really saw you. There comes a moment, quiet, unexpected, when the weight of your performance becomes heavier than the risk of truth. You feel it not as a lightning strike, but as a fracture. A small, precise crack in the narrative you've been telling about who you are and what you want. Something in you whispers, enough. Not in defiance. Not in rage. But in weary, unflinching honesty. And that is the beginning of the rebellion. Not a rebellion of fists or slogans or dramatic exits. No. This revolution begins in silence. In solitude. In the raw, trembling space between your curated self and the truth you buried beneath it. Because to escape the hell Sartre spoke of, to break free from the prison of the gaze, you must first confront the lie that built it. That being seen is more important than being real. So where do you begin? First, you stop performing. Not all at once. Not everywhere. But in small, sacred places. You begin by noticing the mask. The way your voice changes in certain rooms. The way you laugh when you're not amused. The way you nod in agreement to ideas you secretly despise. Catch it. Observe it. Don't judge it, just witness. Awareness is the first weapon of the free. Carl Jung wrote, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So you bring the performance into the light. You name it. You stare it in the face. And slowly, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that were exiled to make others comfortable. You feel the shadow stir. You hear it whispering truths you were taught to fear. I want more. I disagree. I'm not happy here. I don't believe in this anymore. This is not selfishness. This is soul retrieval. Then comes the harder step. You disappoint people. You say no. You change your mind. You break character. You become inconsistent, unpredictable, real. And people will react. Some will leave. Some will judge. Some will cling to the old version of you like a ghost. Let them. Let them grieve the character you played. Because for the first time, you are choosing to exist, not as a reflection in their minds, but as a living, breathing contradiction. Sartre knew freedom would cost everything. Because when you stop performing, you stop being easy to categorize. You become impossible to reduce. And in a world addicted to certainty, that makes you dangerous. But it also makes you alive. Remember Aldous Huxley? In Brave New World, he painted a dystopia of comfort, where pain was eliminated, desires were manufactured, and the individual had been erased beneath the weight of pleasure and conformity. But there was one man, the savage, who rejected it. Who chose grief over sedation, chaos over predictability, freedom over numbness. Huxley wasn't just critiquing a society. He was warning us. Comfort can be a cage. When everything is managed, optimized, and engineered to keep you from feeling discomfort, you slowly forget how to feel anything. So the rebellion is not in chasing pleasure. It's in reclaiming pain, risk, choice, authenticity. You start telling the truth. Not just to others, but to yourself. You admit what you want, what you hate, what you regret, what you love. This is terrifying. Because the truth has consequences. But it also has power. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that suffering is inescapable, but it's in suffering that we find meaning. To live truthfully is to accept that you will lose things. Comfort, approval, certainty. But what you gain is something sacred. A center, a spine, a presence. You stop being a puppet of projections and start becoming a participant in your own life. You start saying, I chose this. I stand by it. Even if no one understands. And this is where something wild happens. The more you embody your truth, the more others around you begin to wake up. Because authenticity is contagious. You've seen it before, in those rare souls who speak without apology, love without conditions, grieve without shame. They unsettle you not because they're loud, but because they're free. They remind you of who you might be if you stopped hiding. They are proof that rebellion is possible. Take James Baldwin. A black, gay man in mid-20th century America, he had every reason to conform, to quiet his voice, to shrink into safety. But he didn't. He wrote with fire, with complexity, with rage and tenderness intertwined. He refused to be simplified. He refused to perform. He once said, you have to go the way your blood beats. If you don't live the only life you have, you won't live some other life, you won't live any life at all. Baldwin wasn't just fighting racism or homophobia. He was fighting the gaze, the reduction of his soul to someone else's stereotype. And he won. Not because the world changed, but because he didn't bend. That's the rebellion. To stop contorting your essence to fit the gaze of others. To stop asking for permission to be real. It doesn't mean isolating yourself. Sartre never argued for that. It means entering relationships, work, and life itself from a place of presence, not performance. It means choosing to be misunderstood over being false. It means letting go of control. Because here's the paradox. The more you try to control how others see you, the more imprisoned you become. But the moment you surrender that control, the moment you say, I am not here to be approved of, you become unstoppable. This is the revolution Sartre gestured toward. Not one of politics or ideology, but of existential honesty. A revolution of the self. One that begins when you stop asking, who do they think I am, and start asking, who do I choose to be? And not once, not twice, but every single day. Because freedom isn't a door you walk through. It's a discipline. It's a practice. It's a sacred, endless act of remembering that you are not a product of others' perceptions, but a fire that cannot be seen, only felt. So light the match, and let it burn everything false. There comes a silence after the fire. After the rebellion, after the masks fall and the performances end, there is a space, unfamiliar and raw. It's not peace, not yet. It's something deeper, more terrifying. It is you. Not the curated you. Not the projected self. Not the version of you built to please, to survive, to win applause. Just you. Unpackaged. Undigested. Unexplained. And for the first time, you are not looking at yourself through someone else's eyes. You are here, not as an object, but as a presence. You realize something in that silence. Something Sartre knew but rarely said so directly. Freedom is not about escaping others. It's about escaping the need to be anything at all. You've spent your life becoming, striving, achieving, crafting an identity like armor, wearing names like ambitious, kind, resilient, funny, successful. But the deeper truth, the one that haunts and heals in equal measure, is this. You are not your name. Not your thoughts. Not your story. Not even your desires. You are not something. You are nothing. Not in the nihilistic sense, but in the most sacred way. The kind of nothing that is spacious, limitless, fertile. The kind of nothing that precedes all creation. Sartre's greatest insight wasn't that hell is other people. It was that you are the void from which your life must be built. You are not a thing to be understood. You are a field of freedom. A clearing. An open sky. And that is both the curse and the miracle. Because if you are nothing fixed, then nothing can save you, and nothing can stop you. Not your past. Not their gaze. Not the roles you once played. Not the pain you once carried. All of it is real. And none of it defines you. You begin to see that authenticity is not a performance of truth. It is the quiet acceptance of your ungraspable self. You are not here to be someone. You are here to be. That's the ultimate truth. And it's the one we fear the most. Because in that space, beyond identity, beyond performance, beyond meaning itself, there is no one left to lie to. No mask to hide behind. No applause to chase. No gaze to validate your existence. Just the terrifying, transcendent fact that you exist. That you breathe. That you choose. That you are the source. And suddenly, there's peace. Not the peace of achievement or closure, but the peace of surrender. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to justify your desires. You don't have to make sense to anyone, not even yourself. You get to live. Fully. Messily. Beautifully. You get to wake up and start again. Not because you have to, but because you can. This is the truth beneath Sartre's firebrand existentialism. The one he hinted at between the lines of his harshest critiques. That the goal of freedom isn't to become someone invincible. It's to become someone real. And reality is messy. It's contradiction. It's sorrow and ecstasy, side by side. You stop needing others to mirror you because you've become your own witness. You stop fearing their judgment because you've faced your own. You stop chasing meaning like a prize and start generating it like a pulse. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." But meaning, you realize now, is not found, it's chosen. And when you choose to live from your center, not for applause, not to be seen, but to be true, everything changes. Your relationships shift. You no longer need others to validate you. You simply meet them, human to human, soul to soul. Your work changes. It stops being a ladder and becomes a canvas. Your inner world softens. The war between who you are and who you should be dissolves. You become less certain, but more grounded. Less polished, but more luminous. You laugh more. Cry more. Say I don't know more. Because you've realized the most radical thing of all. You don't need to be anything other than what you are in this moment. And in that truth, there is no hell. Not because other people have vanished, but because their gaze no longer defines you. They are free to look. You are free to be. And if that is hell, then let it burn. Because from that fire, something sacred rises. Not a perfect life, but an honest one. Not a legacy, but a presence. Not certainty, but courage. Courage to exist without explanation. To love without performance. To walk into the unknown without a map. Sartre taught us that we are condemned to be free. But he also showed us, if we dared to see it, that freedom is the beginning of meaning, not its end. Not a prison, but a blank page. And now that page is in front of you. So the final question is no longer, what will they think? The final question is, what will you create with your freedom? Choose and begin.